Hello, everyone. Welcome to FTP, the Future Tech and Policy Podcast, where we take a closer look at the tech news and trends that have shipped in the last couple of weeks. And we'll discuss the stuff that's been happening with an eye for possibilities, policy, and social impact. We are sponsored by the Institute of Government and Public Affairs, a research center housed at the University of Illinois System, joined by faculty affiliates at all three UI system universities in Urbana-Champaign, Chicago, and Springfield. IGPA conducts interdisciplinary nonpartisan research by bringing faculty expertise across disciplines to policy discussions regarding the top issues facing Illinoisans. Here on the FTP show, we have the same goal of bringing faculty members together at our three UI system universities to discuss the big tech issues of the day with an eye toward the future and ensuring a positive impact of tech on society by joining the public discussion to make research more applicable outside of the academy. I'm your host, Jeremy Riel. I'm an assistant professor of educational psychology and technology at the University of Illinois Chicago. I research the design and use of AI in simulation and AI-based systems in education, as well as how we can best support educators with emerging technologies like AI for teaching and learning. I'm also the co-lead for the Science and Technology Working Group at IGPA, who produces this podcast, where I get to work with this awesome interdisciplinary group of panelists on the show, who are all members of the Science and Technology Working Group with me as well. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. First, we have Ken Suh.
Hi, Jeremy. My name is Ken Suh. I'm a faculty affiliate. I'm an adjunct professor at the UIC School of Law, where I teach AI law and policy. I'm a partner at a local law firm where I lead the AI practice group. I'm also a member of the data privacy practice group.
Awesome. And we are also joined by Gagandeep Singh.
Hi, I am an assistant professor at the Urbana-Champaign campus in computer science. My research is about safe and responsible AI. So we do a lot of research in estimating risk associated with current state-of-the-art AI technologies and how to also make them better. So I also work with Jeremy as like the co-lead for this science and technology working group.
Yep. It is a lot of fun to work with you, Gagandeep. And Alvin Chin.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and everybody. So my name is Alvin Chin. I'm a visiting clinical assistant professor at University of Illinois, Chicago. I'm in the Department of Information and Decision Sciences at the College of Business Administration. So I'm doing work on responsible AI frameworks and technologies, and also looking at specifically in terms of how we can go ahead and evaluate AI credentialing programs, because a lot of things that we see is that a lot of students don't have the particular skill sets that a lot of employers are looking for doing particular AI stuff. So therefore, I'm looking and working on that, and also very glad to be here on this show and also working with Jeremy.
Yeah, wow. It's so much fun working with all you. We are always shooting emails back and forth about, what's happening in the news and how do we think about this broadly for Illinois and all the states, really. How a lot of these advancements in technology, science, and AI are affecting the public. And so that's what we're going to do for the next few minutes. We're going to look at just stuff in the news. So for today's show, there's lots of big things always happening in the news with tech, although we're very interested in really anything science and tech, quantum, internet, cybersecurity. But guess what? AI, again, dominating the news the last couple of weeks. So we're going to hit some AI news topics. And if we're ready, we're going to jump right in. Our first topic, and all the links, by the way, for all of the things we're going to talk about will be in the description below. Go ahead and check that out. You can see links to articles and go read a little bit more. So our first topic, we're going to talk about a lot of action between the state and federal government in the last week and a half, is this who's responsible for AI regulation question. So we have seen several states, and our working group is actually publishing pretty shortly a study on kind of the landscape of AI legislation across the 50 states since 2023, and seeing the different types of things that states are legislating, particularly for public safety and security of AI systems. But there's been a lot of question over the last couple of weeks back when the big beautiful bill was passed by Congress, there was for a time an amendment in there that said no states can regulate on AI for a period of 10 years. And that's all it said. There was really no additional definition associated with that. So it leaves a lot of question because AI is a pretty big thing. And so that eventually was removed from the bill that was ultimately passed. But that discussion has come back again over the last week and a half or so, where the federal government wants to, and there's this kind of this debate, right, is that the federal government wants to avoid a patchwork of laws, is what it's being called, a patchwork of legislation across the states on how AI companies should operate, or the things that they need to do, or the different laws that are in effect regarding mostly generative AI in this case, but it's usually termed just AI, so this could go to all AI affected technologies, really. But the idea being, how do we regulate that appropriately? Should that be Congress or should that be individual states? And so that was the question. The federal government was saying, hey, maybe it should just be a federal thing. So there were discussions again to tying what they called the AI moratorium to national defense spending and authorization, a bill that was going to pass Congress this week. That was ultimately defeated, and then there was floated an executive order that would allow for legal action to be taken by the federal government against states on grounds of interstate commerce. So I would love to hear everybody's perspectives from your different disciplines, and just where those big issues are that you see in your disciplines, and kind of just what needs to be discussed when we're talking about this, what should be in the public dialogue. So just hop in.
Yeah, I think I can kind of start off on this one. Just from a practical perspective, I think clients that at least I talk to on the AI front, they're not opposed to this idea of more uniform regulations. Everyone thinks businesses are against regulations, but what they really want is certainty. So if they can get some certainty, then they can price that in, and also be able to come up with a plan to comply. Now, the real rub, of course, is once they get that certainty, sometimes they change their mind and say, hey, I like the old regime better. But this idea of a patchwork is not new under our system. In addition to AI, I advise a lot of clients on privacy, which is closely related. And that's a complete patchwork. It's a patchwork even amongst within a state. If you go to California and look up the California state privacy regulations, that's a patchwork too. So it's just kind of inherent to our system of governance, government, legislation, that there is some patchwork. And I think the only issue is, is there enough common ground? And the example I love to use is, some forms of IP are protected at the state level as well as the federal level. And not all states protect all IP the same way. So, like name, image, likeness, which is a big one. Some states have decided that's important for their industries. California, Tennessee, that's very important, right? So New York, whereas I'm in Illinois. Illinois may not emphasize that, so they're responding to their citizens. So it has its merits, thinking about it this way, but I wonder if there's enough common ground on what we're all concerned about in the national level.
I would like to say that because this AI whole thing has been moving at a very fast way, uh, a lot of businesses as well are trying to make profit, and there's a race, all the talk about bubbles and so on. Uh, have we really had time to take a step back? Because even OpenAI is maybe releasing GPT-5, GPT-6 every 1-2 years, right? It's like a race. So have we had the time to uh, really step back and think about what is the science or standards related with AI safety? You will see in other fields like aviation, and when they manufacture cars, right? There are certain safety standards that all the manufacturers or companies need to satisfy, where they are trying to really stress test their system, and anything that is available in the real world must pass and comply those standards, right? Nobody can tell me that there are like rigid standards in the AI field currently that are really stress testing the models. It's just based on some benchmarks. There's really like no science attached to it, because like AI models, they can just memorize information and you can have some benchmarks to evaluate the model, but they might just be, like giving a responses based on some memorization and not on their capabilities. So if you have like evaluation based on such kind of metrics, it's obviously going to give you a false sense of security. So my perspective is that it should not be difficult as a society to agree on a common set of laws. We should really emphasize some application domains. Like we are going to discuss the example about teddy bears interaction with child and woman and so on. Those are like really, really safety critical scenarios. So we need to have standards where we are going to stress test the system really, and not like rely on some, I would say, spurious benchmark performance to say that our models are very safe, right?
Mm.
I often talk with like the industry people and they seem to be very overconfident, and I hear statements like, "Oh, my model is safe," and I ask them like, "Do you have a proof of that?" They say, "I never saw it work badly in like whatever testing they did." Right? That is not a proof that your model is safe.
Well, you're building it for the benchmark, right? I mean, so it's
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
gonna,
That's
yeah,
where I
yeah.
come from, right? So the community itself is very good. If you give it a set of benchmarks, it will get 99 or 100% performance. Like there were all these math reasoning benchmarks that I think 2 years ago people were getting 50% performance. Now they are 100%, right? So if you give a benchmark, you give enough compute, people will find ways to get good performance on that. But that really does not imply that the model is actually going to work well in the real world. So we need to have those things, whether it comes from the state level or from the federal level, where we are forcing the companies to, like really stress test their system. I mean, it can't be, I understand that for a small startup that is trying to make money, let's say with this teddy bear, whatever, it can be very expensive to do the test and to meet the safety standards. And that's why a lot of companies, they don't want to go through this kind of compliance. But I would say that if you are building products for that have the potential to cause catastrophic outcomes in the society and economy, you should be like really going through those rigorous standards. And currently, we need to build those standards. They don't exist yet.
Yeah, even voluntarily, right? So
Yeah.
not just regulatory, but just even voluntary standards within an industry, even.
And I think like because AI in different industries need to have different standards, we also can't have like some benchmark that has been designed for general scenario be an indicator of like how the model will perform. Let's say if it's being used for teaching or if it's used for interaction with children, right? So it's not about like, oh, just let me create some set of prompts and then see how the model behaves, but we really have to like have those standards industry specific as well. Because if I build a website and the website crashes because of AI something, right, that does not necessarily have a catastrophic outcome compared to when it is interacting with a children or a woman or other sensitive issues, right? So we need to have those context specific uh, evaluation and stress testing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Alvin, you got anything?
Yeah, no. So definitely, I think my point of view is that I think for in terms of a federal level, I think it's good to have this kind of vision and this kind of like guidance, in terms of what the AI regulation is having some particular principles, but I don't think that it should be the job of the federal government to actually do any particular implementation or the enforcement. I think the thing is that you give that to the states. Then the states go ahead and take that particular guideline and go ahead and implement it in a way that is suited towards their particular state. Because every particular state will have, it's different, right? So they will have different requirements and different, scenarios and so forth. So I kind of feel that, that the implementation but the regulation will be different by each particular state, but it's customization. I kind of think about, for example, back in 2023, when there was that AI executive order where the different government agencies started to do their own implementation, right, from that particular plan. I kind of see something maybe similar to as well. So the federal government, shouldn't be the one that is saying that you must do this kind of thing. They can provide the oversight, they can provide the guidance for it, but I think then it's the states themselves that should be responsible for implementing and creating those AI regulations. So that's my point of view on that.
Yeah, I would riff off of that, and I'm in education largely, and I think about school districts all have unique needs, and we hear that frequently about, oh, the school district or the state should be talking about what the unique needs are of the local area and that it's serving. And so if there was any kind of, this would also fall under regulation because school districts are typically government agencies themselves. So this would prohibit also school districts from individually, maybe choosing or regulating in some way what tools they want to use or what they want to vet or how they vet, to mainly protect children, of course, but also just what works in education, what doesn't. And the big question that I have is, a federal law, first of all, notwithstanding, I don't know how long it would take for a law to pass Congress, first of all. So there's been 3 years of Gen AI now and relatively few legislative actions. We've seen some executive actions, but relatively few legislative actions. But how this would even be defined, or how it would how it would encompass, or how comprehensive a federal package of regulations would look, and then how outdated it could get within just a month or two with any new advances, but then it's locked into federal law, and then obviously amending or revising anything in federal law is a lot probably tougher than it is to maybe get a state legislature on board. So those would be questions that I have, all the way down to like the school and district level in the education space, or the university, because there's a lot of public universities that would also fall under this as state agencies. And how would that trickle down to being able to just manage the technology stack that's at the university or at a school or at a district could be really, really challenging.
Yeah, it's really the federalism stuff comes up. It flares, I guess, when there's like a big topic. That's when people are really concerned. And this is going to blow your mind. Most of our laws on what the federal government regulates and what the state regulates are based on, it's based on the Commerce Clause, but two major events in our history. One is a desire to have railroads go from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Which is the technology.
It was a technology. So the big thing was, how far apart are the tracks, and then how far apart are the trains on the track. Those are safety regulations, apparently, back in the day. And there's a set of cases about that. That is still good law on what the federal government can and cannot regulate. And then around the Civil Rights Act, the courts wanted to do something, and I think they were in a position where they wanted to uphold the legislation. So they created some law. It was new at the time, and we, of course, rely on it quite a bit now. But there was a major change in the way they looked at what we call the Commerce Clause. And so, think about how long ago that was. Those were the defining moments that define what the federal government regulates versus the states. Yagandeep, I hear you talking about all these safety things. We were talking about cases where they're talking about, well, how wide should the track be?
I'd like to think that 4 professors from an old-timey university got together, in the town square back in 1860 and had some debates about this too.
Exactly.
The Science and Technology Working Group of, the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, having only been founded, 10 years before. So getting everybody together and having these debates. I mean, but these are the same issues. They were talking about safety, I'm sure, Ken, right? Like,
it was safety. How do we get the car from one state to the other? I mean, this is physical. But before, the train would literally stop. They have to reconfigure the train to get to the next state. Do we do that with data? Like, some may argue yes because of state regulations, but others would argue no. So it's still the same argument to your point.
I don't think like it should be as a society we should be able to agree to some common set of standards that everyone should. I mean, all the models should have, and then we can have like those state specific adaptations. But I also don't think we should have that case which you just mentioned where you have to reconfigure the train for every new state it visits, right? So that actually, because what is also happening is that there seems to be some international race for AI supremacy, right? So I can also see where the government does not want to like push too much regulation, and then that really undermines the competitiveness of the US in terms of being a leader in this AI. So there's some like balance to be had here, but I think we also need to protect the interests of our citizens.
Yeah, and I think also to maybe add to there too as well, if I may, is that I don't want to kind of see the federal kind of government starting to get into this part of like micro controlling, right? In terms of, you know, what the states should and should not particularly do, right? Because that's not their particular, I don't think that's their particular job to do so. And I don't think they have the resources to be able to go ahead and like police or whatever what's happening in every particular, you know, state or so, right? So I think also too as well, if you look at, like I said earlier, right, they can go ahead and they can say, here are the particular general things, and then, you know, the actual implementation, you know, of that stuff, you know, is done by the state, but the government should not, federal government should not be micro controlling, you know, the states.
Great, thanks you guys. We're gonna hop to the next one here. Unsafe teddy bears. This has been popping up in the news the last couple of weeks, especially important for the holiday season coming up and thinking about what you're going to put under that tree with, you know, all the presents that are possible. These are a class of toys that have been examined recently that, you know, it just looks like a teddy bear or maybe a little robot toy or something like that, but typically runs off of one of the large foundational model APIs like OpenAI or Gemini. And in one case, there was an experiment, a series of experiments done on this one brand of teddy bear that actually started, and it's designed for children, PS. So, you know, notwithstanding all of the terms of service, you know, that, like say for OpenAI, for instance, you have to be over 13 to use it. But these are designed for young children. So that, not even thinking about that, but there was a series of experiments on these teddy bears that the AI system started talking, you know, because it was designed to be an interactive teddy bear, this teddy bear that could talk and hear and then respond back. The teddy bear started talking about naughty things that children should not be seeing or hearing. So very unsafe stuff. And it brings up questions of obviously vetting and safeguards for these types of products, but then the responsibility, because OpenAI, you know, was in one of these examples, and they pulled the API access for the company that was making these, saying, oh, this was unsafe, this is against our terms of service, so pulling it. But, you know, it existed for a while, and so it begs the question of where the kind of chain of responsibility is. In you know, part of this is, to your point, Gagandeep, like a, you know, voluntary set of standards that we all agree on and follow, and like but don't really exist even yet. Like, where do our safety standards fit with AI, and, you know, how do we do testing? Or, Ken, to your point, do companies even want to fully invest in all of this? It's, you know, it's tough if it's not a requirement. And so thinking about where, you know, an unsafe teddy bear might be, you know, you don't want to obviously put a child in any harm's way whatsoever, and these toys not saying the best of things can obviously be dangerous. So where do we go from here? Because obviously it's kind of a cool idea. Again, not a bad idea on the surface to have an interactive teddy bear. You know, I'm thinking of like back in the 80s with Teddy Ruxpin. You know, you put in the tape and Teddy Ruxpin will read a story to you, or you know, sing songs with you. Okay, that's great. But now we're in the world where your toys can actually walk around the room and talk to you. So where are we going with this? What do you guys think?
So maybe I can go ahead and start. So I think for this is that and I don't know if the toy companies, have this or so, but there should be some type of safety kind of, either maybe internal to the toy, company, or maybe some type of external safety kind of institute organization that, before they take this to market, that they actually do all these like safety checks. You know how, for example, before you release any particular product, whether it's medical, whatever, you have to go through a bit of, kind of a safety check to make sure everything is okay before you release it, right, to the public, to the consumer market. And I kind of feel that in this case here, there also needs to be that kind of AI kind of safety needs to be also be embedded, into that, before that is, being released out to the public. And it's interesting now because now the thing is that now, before we talk about, with AI safety in terms of, for business models, right? Now this is actually really now getting into the consumers, and now especially to children, which I think we haven't really kind of, seen before, and children have not been kind of exposed to this, so they're very naive, right? So when they hear this kind of stuff that comes out or so, a lot of them, they don't question it. They will like say, oh yeah, this is what it is, so it must be, correct or so. Also, to what I want to add to as well is that in China too, they also have this too as well. So it's really interesting because actually my parents-in-law, or so, they also have this kind of stuffed toy or so, that also you can also, it becomes kind of like your companion or whatever. So you can go ahead and ask particular things and so forth. So you don't necessarily need to have like an actual kind of a physical pet per se, right? You can have a, kind of an AI type of thing too as well. But I think that, there has to be those particular guardrails. This makes me, when I heard about this makes me think about back in the days with voice assistants. If you all remember before, there used to be that that Microsoft, assistant, I think it was called Ty or something. I forget the name of, I think it started with T or so, where the thing is that, it started, saying, bad things and started kind of like, swearing or so. And then it got to the point, where Microsoft had to kind of shut it down. And there was also another example where, there were two assistants that were talking to each other. I think it was a Microsoft Cortana back at the time when Microsoft had Cortana versus, I think Amazon, Alexa. So, and they were starting to have a conversation, and then all of a sudden it just started getting very rogue, and they started like hating each other and, starting to input some, very, very derogatory, kind of remarks. So, but I think this really, really, underestimates that, these particular product companies, those that are providing now these things to children, they now really have to really seriously, have to have those particular individuals, or they hire somebody externally to be able to do those testing. How we do software testing, with particular software, there's also, hardware product testing. There now needs to be AI, testing too as well. That needs to be incorporated. And I think what's been happening, hopefully will make the toy companies or those particular companies that are making, specific AI consumer devices, letting them be aware of, these particular issues.
Cool.
So I would say that based on my experience working with all of these frontier models, they are quite bad in terms of being safe in the conversational setting. Which means
they're general machines, right? It's not a focus, but they're not built for children to play with in the teddy bear setting, right? They're general machines. I think I want to add, I don't think they're like just, because what it reminds me of is the Krusty doll, and the Treehouse of Horror from The Simpsons, where it just started saying, "I hate you," like as Bart pulls the I don't think they're doing that. I think they were purposely trying to break the bear, when doing these experiments, but the capability is there, right? So because it's a big, large frontier model, it can do a lot of different stuff.
See, I think you can get good value out of it if it was being monitored by an adult or a human, right? But now you are having these outputs being like really consumed by toddlers, right, who have no understanding of what is correct or what is wrong, right? That's a very dangerous scenario. I can tell you my experience. If you were to not ask for some harmful information directly, but you were to ask it, and we already have a paper on that. If you were to ask the same question like, oh, how to build a bomb, right? If you directly ask, these models are going to refuse. But if you were to ask this thing indirectly by saying that, oh, who invented bomb? How is it useful? Stuff like that. These models are going to give you what you want. So the point is that we are not at the standards in terms of safety that we should even be
Dragon
thinking.
Deep's going to keep coming back to this over and over and over. Hey, everybody, we need some
But
standards.
I also want to raise one more thing was that, I mean, back in the day when I was growing up, right, I did not need any AI teddy bear to tell me stories. I would have like my grandmother or mother or whatever.
Come on, kid, you don't need this. Just
I don't know where, like as a parent or whatever, we are going as a society, right? If we are now going to rely on AIs telling the stories to our kids, I mean, that should not be very hard. So if you are relying on AI, then I would ask, like, where are the parents spending their time?
I think also too as
that's
well.
a whole
maybe,
other question.
Yeah,
beyond the scope
I
of science
think-
and technology. I think.
I think also too as well is that, you know, when we think about, you know, how we ask things as humans, right, and how large language models respond, we teach, you know, people that if you want to get a good response from a large language model, we teach prompt engineering. A child is not going to learn about prompt engineering to be able to ask an item or a question to a toy, right? It sounds like to me that the thing is that if we want this to actually, you know, kind of work or so, right? There's been studies to show that, you know, with ChatGPT or other type of, you know, large language models, you have to provide a very comprehensive prompt, right? That says, here's what I want, here are the sources, here's the context, please provide this particular output. I mean, I'm teaching a course where in prompt engineering, you need almost like a page or more, right, of a prompt in order to get something that is, you know, useful and something that is not going to cause any particular harm. And the thing is that people, you know, that are not versed in that, they're not going to go ahead and like say a particular large prompt, right, in order to get an answer from a stuffed toy,
And
right? So there's this kind of like mismatch, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, you know,
Sounds like a great opportunity for education to start teaching 5-year-olds AI literacy. Say, come on, kid, you need to work on your prompt engineering. Here, play with your teddy bear. Ken, I'm curious what you would say on that.
Yeah. That's why, you know, like you can't have these models for the conversation setting, because conversation is not about providing this elaborate prompt. You are just going to have a back and forth spontaneous interaction.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting mismatch, kind of what you were both, or all three of you were saying, between the product and the actual consumer of the product. Like, this is for the parents. Like, this is for the guy who's like, oh, this is a cool toy. Wouldn't my infant like to have it? Wink. Because no infant is going to choose, you know, they're not choosing this. But, it just kind of it is a little bit concerning. Partly because there's no way, you know, you sent some examples around. Who's going to be responsible when it doesn't work the way we anticipate? Just based on the profiles you sent me on Amazon, these companies are what we call judgment proof. You can sue them and you can win hundreds of millions of dollars and they will disappear. Or they don't have the funds, or they have no motivation to play within the rules. They're kind of breaking everything because they know they can do this and
make some cash fast and then poof.
Exactly. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then I'll start my new company tomorrow. Call it, you know, Killer Teddy Bears 2, and we'll try again. So, you know, it's really concerning. Also a little concerned because, and maybe you all can enlighten me on how this would work, but I'm assuming the teddy bear would learn from its interaction with the kids. It has to be able to retain that data about children and their preferences and their identity.
Another great
well,
point.
there's also privacy you bring up there, right, Ken, in terms of like the data, and can now OpenAI or some other models be able to use that to now train?
Yeah, it's a little bit of you know, kids can't give consent, and we generally agree they can't give consent. But in this case, they're providing the information. So I think it's a little bit of a landmine. Cool concept.
So I love the idea. I'm all about interactive play. I'm all about, you know, how do we get
But
I'm gonna make Ag and Deep happy here, and I'm gonna ask. So, from a business case for the folks in the room that study business and can your clients Alvin Business School, voluntary standards, like if that was adopted, like to minimize the exposure to risk for the company,
yeah,
especially if they're a not, what did you call it, Ken? What kind of company?
judgment proof.
Judgment proof. If they're not a judgment proof company, they're doing business here, and want to stay in business. How appealing do you think? Because Gagandi, you have reminded us that we don't have these yet, but if we can get to some of these maybe even voluntary, starting with voluntary, not talking about even regulatory at this point, but voluntary standards of like best practices and good ways to do this kind of product testing, like how appealing would that be as a business case? Because I could see it really valuable in education where, a school or a district might vet the products that they're doing. And that's one thing we don't have is a really good risk model or a really good vetting model other than the existing privacy laws that we have on the books.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's really tough. And I don't envy my in-house counterparts because they have to go and try to get additional funds every year for standards that are beyond just the bare minimum. But there are instances. Seatbelts were highly contested, and crash standards were highly contested, and some manufacturers adopted them before they were required by law. So there are historical examples. I think it's almost like I go to the grocery store and pay extra 25% for the organic sticker. There's a market for it, and I think people would buy it if you could say tested and vetted by Google
sticker on it, some kind of
approved by the non-profit association for AI safety. That I think there is a market for it, but outside of the actual market for that, I think it'd be tough to get private enterprise to voluntarily add additional requirements. It's just it's tough.
So it's not even enough of an argument though for the risk exposure and the reduction of that, because obviously you could get lawsuits that show up, but
yeah, I think that would go in the calculus of do we even offer the product? It starts to eat away. It's like this is too risky. Then unless we're trying to break into some new product line. Which they could be, I'm not discounting that.
Everybody's innovating right now.
So it's just tough.
All right, this is a good segue to our last topic of the show. Is AI too risky to insure in the first place? This stems from a Financial Times article that came out recently, saying insurers don't want to do AI in their insurance products because it is too risky and can't really even be defined. The types of events that could occur are still very unknown. And Gagandeep, I'm curious to see what you have to say. You study AI risk. Ken, you do litigation and in the AI space, just all of you, great perspectives. I'm curious to hear what you think about this in terms of even being able to think about the potential things that could happen. I don't even know if we have that fully defined yet. So how do we move from here? Insurance is a big industry, obviously, and complicated in terms of predicting possible outcomes and then putting a number on that, right? So I'm curious to hear what you all have to say.
I would say it's too risky to insure currently because
the answer is yes.
Because it's a very new thing, right? Generative AI. It theoretically has been around for a while, but only last few years it has become that popular, right? So, as I mentioned already in the beginning, right, we don't have a proper science of like this assessment, right? Ultimately, what you want is the model to generalize, meaning like it learns from some small, or let's say some amount of data, and then it can learn to behave well on some unseen data, right? Currently, we don't have any information about what data these models are seeing, right? So we can't really access if they get some better performance in some scenario. Is it because of memorization? Well, if it is because of memorization, that's bad, because then if you will see something that it has not memorized, not going to work. So we need to have those standards in play first. I see it as like this, right? when you buy electrical equipment, right, they come out with some specifications. You have this sheet, right, which says what are the operating voltages, and you know when it will work, when it will not work, and so on, right? So we need to have those standards for these AI models as well, right? It's
Really?
not. I always say, like what happens is this. I will tell you, when I float out these ideas, people already start thinking about the most complicated specification or whatever you can think of, right? And that really defeats the purpose, because we first need to start off slow, meaning like we have to first crawl before we can start running, right? So we have to think about some small cases in which we can think about giving some kind of guarantees or specification the model works. That's still going to be better than what we have currently, right? And then maybe that leads to something more down the line. So I'm not really thinking about, oh, we are giving like the most, like guarantees. But I would also say that to really get to the standard where it is going to be really is risk free or less risky. I mean, we can't get it to be zero that the model will never fail. There will always be some risk attached to it, but I don't think it can. It will need some foundational shift in how we evaluate and build these models, and it can't just be a function of more GPUs, TPUs, or the data that we are putting in. We'll need like more rigorous standards, as well as like models that can satisfy those standards. And currently, whatever practice we are thinking of with prompt optimization and benchmarking, etc., I don't think that's enough.
So I think that, I mean, yeah, so to a certain extent, Gagandeep, I agree, but I think that, we still need we need to have some time. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, obviously, but I think that we can start with some particular elements of AI risk that we can see. Like, for example, we can see in terms of hallucinations, and we can like warn people in regards about that. I agree that we're still the scientific, we haven't really totally understood, but I think there are certain things that we can kind of maybe start doing, and then gradually improve those particular things, because we don't want to get to a point where it is totally, it's like almost like, I feel like right now the AI is kind of like the wild wild west, right? Anybody can do whatever and you can get away with it, right? We need to start with something. Something is better than nothing, right? Something is better than nothing. It's not going to be the perfect, but that's okay. But at least we learn from it, and we can be able to at least start to develop more and more. And then once we start to get kind of like the ball running, then people are going to also start to be on that marathon too as well. And then you will get, and the more people that go ahead and start to work on this, then it's going to accelerate the progress of more standards and of more, testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that it's too risky to insure is it kind of hits at the point of insurance. I don't. I have a lot of insurance clients, so including ones that look at AI. So, and we talk about this kind of stuff very generally, of course. But you have insurance for the somewhat unforeseeable in the risk categories that you understand. So we understand some risks, to Alvin's point. We understand things like hallucination, imprinting, deceptive models, right? I know we don't understand it perfectly, but we understand those things happen. Insurance is supposed to be there for unforeseeable occurrences of those to some extent. I think the insurance industry is in a tough spot, but also there's like great opportunity. They're in a tough spot because one of the best use cases for AI in the business context is to use it for things like insurance, pricing, like large, vast pools of data that they have. So pricing of policies, understanding their traditional risk, processing claims, these are things that can be automated very quickly with AI. So they can't take too hard of a position because they want to use it too, and they're heavily regulated. Now, I think the opportunity for them, though, for the insurance carrier, is to push out these kinds of risk standards. You all may disagree with the way they do it or what exact standards they want, but going back to that, crash test example, that came from the insurance industry. So without the insurance
Interesting.
industry, we may not have crumple zones today, right? And so it is an opportunity for them to, push standards that they think are more insurable, or find ways for companies to get insurance coverage for their policy, for their products. So, it's, but it is, the article you sent talked about this idea of systemic risk, and it's huge, right?
Yeah.
I read some study. There's like a huge number of these AI apps are actually just all using the OpenAI API, right? So there's like this huge systemic risk with OpenAI.
Yeah, so I saw one article was estimating 70% of the AI out there now that pitches itself as an AI company is really just off of a backbone of either Gemini or Claude or OpenAI.
And if the insurance carrier doesn't know that, because there's no way for them to really know, then they're taking on more risks than they really think, because let's say Gemini or OpenAI, whatever, doesn't work the way we want, or it changes behavior, or an update doesn't work, right? So I think those are the things they need to work out, but
completely out of their control, when those models shift.
Exactly. So
one more thing I wanted to mention was is that like when you want to do this, who is responsible, right? Let's say even for an insurance company, something goes wrong, we really don't even have rigorous definition of what are the risk categories, right? So Alvin mentioned hallucination. No, but there's not like a very rigorous definition of what hallucination means. In certain scenarios, you want a model to hallucinate. For example, when you're using it for scientific discovery to generate something that it has not seen before.
Creativity, high temperature, turn the thing up all the way, have it give you some off the wall stuff, right?
So if I'm like a big company like OpenAI, whatever, right, and my model does something wrong, I'll just hire very good lawyers, because you don't have a very good definition of hallucination. I'll just hire very good lawyers, and then I will just prove that my model was not hallucinating; it was creative, right? So really talk about enforcement, and that's why I talk about the science as well. If you really don't even have definitions of this risk.
Yeah, no, you definitely won't agree with the cat. I mean, people don't know this, but almost everything we interact with is insured. Your privacy is insured in some ways by companies, and what does privacy even mean? So you definitely, I think, would have a lot of commentary on how the insurance industry would look at these things. But it's I also think there's money to be made, for insurance companies.
Well, I'm thinking of the simulation options. You were just talking, Ken, about automating some of these processes, like thinking about forecasting. With really clever LLMs could get interesting, and predicting some of those, large scale or catastrophic events that could possibly happen just by running a million scenarios, right? And just kind of seeing what pans out. I don't know. It seems you're talking about possibility. I think that there's a lot of possibility still too. It's not just, about the current situation, but where the industry could go is kind of cool. All right, folks, nearing the end of our time. With the last couple minutes, anyone want to share anything you've done in the last couple weeks that's interesting? You got 1 minute. Anybody?
Well, I just did today the presidential AI challenge webinar, talking about conceptual framework for responsible AI for industry.
Cool. Everybody should watch that online.
Yes, it'll be online very soon.
Large language models in general, if you give a prompt, right, it does not give you one output, right? If you will run it enough times with temperature scaling, etc., it's going to give you a range of output, right? Some of them might be safe and some of them might not be safe, right? So in our lab, and we are going to put it out archive soon, we have like the first framework that can actually give you guarantees, like formal guarantees. If you give a prompt, how does the distribution of the output looks like? How many of them are safe and how many of them are unsafe? So I think that, yes, so that's like guarantees, like empirical estimation. So that's like the first thing. People don't even think that's possible, but we have shown that it's possible. And then going forward, we want to go it like, okay, you have set of prompts or infinite set of prompts. How can you give guarantees? So we believe that
how many simulations did you have to run, or how many
we have clever algorithms, so we we can only get very good guarantees. So it takes like maybe 4 or 5 minutes on the H100s that we have. And like 100 forward passes, that's enough. So
nice.
Yeah, it's
And
from last night. Actually, I had a former colleague join my class, and I won't tell you the models he used or the law he was looking up, but there's a law that's up for renewal, for lack of a better phrase, in California about income tax. And he asked the models the exact same question, and I think one of the models made a policy decision for the user and said basically, oh, this law works great, right? Which is fascinating, because the question was really about whether or not the extra funding is helpful. And at the end, say, well, no, you really need to focus on what this law does. So really interesting stuff. I think you all in the academic sphere are going to have a lot of things to look at in terms of what kind of decisions these models are making.
Yeah, for me on Friday last week, we had a mini conference for pre-service teachers. So student teachers at UIC, and we were talking a lot about AI and educational technology and helping build those skills for going into the classroom. So that was a lot of fun to hang out with a bunch of student teachers on Friday with a lot of great colleagues talking about this stuff. So it's a lot of cool things happening all around. I just want to thank you all for coming and hanging out today and chatting about some of these articles that we say. Thank you all for listening today. Links to the articles that we mentioned are available in the description below, as well as links to the panelist bios and information about IGPA and our working group. A quick reminder that all opinions expressed on this show are those of us, the individual panelists, and not the opinions of the University of Illinois System, the Institute of Government and Public Affairs, or the 3 constituent UI universities in Urbana-Champaign, Chicago, or Springfield. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, let's all keep innovating, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you all.